I thought I had, I don't know if there's anything I need to do special in order to record.
Yes.
Jim is the host.
I started the recording. Hello, you can hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, yeah. There's a host key for the room.
I have the host key.
All right, so under participants, if I'm not here, you'll have a choice claim host.
Oh, okay.
Key, and then you can record.
Okay, so it's only in the event that you're not logged in, you're not a participant in the meeting. Okay, that was when I needed.
Won't let you claim host while I'm here.
If you're here, gotcha. Okay, good. Well, we're so this is Jim. I'll let you do the.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Internet. Welcome everyone to the August 5th meeting for blockchain art, and we have quite our illustrious cast of characters and colleagues in the participant list. And so we were just discussing, picking up from last week, where Eric was inquiring about the technical aspects or more of the intricacies or technical underpinnings of ARCAT. And so last Friday we had was the RSong meeting, and Greg Meredith was discussing some of the architecture of ARCAT and what it does. So that's where we were just discussing before we hit the record button. So Eric, if you wanted to talk to that, speak to that, see if that was that Friday discussion was kind of along the lines of what you were wanting to learn.
Yeah. So I guess it was very helpful, and I appreciated that conversation quite a bit. I'm still feeling fuzzy about what ARCAT is, what ARCAT is outside and independent of RChain as a content distribution platform. You see what I'm saying?
Maybe what it is.
Could I just put a quick stab at that? So the idea is that RSong is built on top of ARCAT.
Yeah, and so what I'm trying to understand is what are the capabilities of ARCAT in relationship to the content stored on the blockchain, right? Like, have you already set up rubrics for how? I mean, my understanding is that there is some type of digital rights management system in place for intervening or mediating viewership, right? So you can sort of set the protocol, the structure that you want in place to that's what ARCAT is doing, is it's managing your access to the files stored on RChain. Or am I completely wrong about that?
Yeah, I took Friday off, so I wasn't at that meeting. I don't know what Greg said. Did he say that there's a DRM built into ARCAT?
Yeah, and Gary also implied that there's another system that you guys are talking to. Gary, what was that called again? Someone had developed a protocol like a long time ago for digital rights management.
Electronic rights transfer protocol, which it's my feeling that we can build an ERTP out of Rolang, with not too much difficulty. I mean, we could have done it ourselves, but why not just use what Marques Builder has already come up with?
Yeah, but that's not there now.
Well, no, but enough of Rolang is there that we can do what DRM that we need now. And I think that's what Eric was getting at. Yes, I think we've got enough in place to do DRM now.
But I want to be clear. It's not done. It doesn't exist. We could do it. But,
I mean, but what I'm saying is the language itself. We can roll our own DRM in Rolang. Jim, would you?
Yeah, but what I'm saying is nobody's done it yet. And so I mean, we can do a lot in lots of things, but there is no code in place now to handle that.
But there is for our song.
No, there isn't. That's why I'm not sure what Greg said. As we had a deal, we had a contract with a compression company, and this is one of the problems with. We're supposed to be radically transparent, but there was a lot about that deal that wasn't, and I'm not even know as a staff member of the co-op what I could say. Sure. But everybody knows we had a deal with this company called Immersion. Mm-hmm. And basically it was a codec to do compression. My understanding was buried inside of that compression algorithm was DRM. It was never really discussed openly. It was never discussed. But once our deal with them was invalidated, I don't know of any other way that our song currently does any kind of DRM. Now, there is scaffolding with the system, with Rolang, with, if people use their wallet address to somehow pay for streaming, that you could absolutely build DRM on top of this. But as far as I know, there's nothing there now to do that.
Ned, would you say that DRM is something that would be added at the DAP level?
My understanding was that, it was kind of like what other folks are doing, where they take certain frequencies within the WAV file or the audio file, and they embed some codes in there. So embedded inside the audio file itself is the DRM mechanism. Right, that's how the streaming companies do it now, right? They take that certain frequency notch and they put code in there to prove rights and to keep you from pirating the songs. That's how it's been working for.
Yeah, well, they're not doing a very good job of it right now.
Yeah, but that's the plan that they've been using for, I think it's got to be like 15 years. It's so long ago, I haven't even thought about it. There was a big brouhaha about it, and then Metallica came out against Napster, and it seemed like this was kind of passed as the way everybody was going to do DRM by embedding something at a certain frequency level. Of course, the purists were up in arms because, oh my gosh, how can you take music out of that frequency level to put your code in there? And I believe the Immersion had something that used something very similar.
Ned, have you seen any of DCKC's talks he's done on electronic rights transfer protocol?
No.
Those things were, very enlightening for me. You might watch them and say, no, that's something different. But it doesn't seem to me that we're that far away from DRM or ERTP or, whatever we need for any given DAP.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I just want to be clear that nothing has been built yet. Now, we absolutely have the potential to build it. And it would be great if somebody in the community worked on that. But there's, my understanding, Kayvon's always adding to our song. But, my understanding is that except for the front access into the song itself, right, so the song is going to be streamed from the back end to your device, whether it's a mobile device or a web browser. The song will be streamed, and you can't access that song unless you pass through the proxy server, right? And so there's going to be some kind of digital identity taking place, right? So we need some kind of life ID or digital ID so you can validate who you are. And I don't know that, we no longer even have access to the mobile players, right? When our deal with Immersion died, we lost access to the mobile players. So those all have to be rebuilt also.
Right.
So could we build, kind of, authentication and digital ID? Absolutely. And then do we do it in some front end programming language? Rust, JavaScript, C#, and then what has to be done on the back end to do the handshake, between the two?
Can I ask you a really stupid question?
Sure.
Cool. Why would you not use open standards and open protocols for designing an open source music system? Like, why cut a deal with a compression company to do this rather than using an alternative means of verifying someone's access to a file on the decentralized storage blockchain?
So that's a great question, and I think the answer to that is the DRM with the immersion deal was kind of coming along. That wasn't the reason we contracted with immersion, right? So the reason we contracted with immersion was because of their compression and also because of the capabilities of their sound codec, which, given the right hardware, et cetera, was supposed to have been amazing.
But it required specialized hardware.
Well, it didn't work over Bluetooth, so you couldn't work it over a mobile device like an iPhone. They did have designs in the future of putting special chips inside of headphones and marketing new headphones, which wasn't really even that expensive to make that chip, but it just hadn't been done yet. And from what I understand, if you had gone to the immersion company in their studios and heard the experience, it was life-changing. But you either needed, special speaker or speakers place certain. I don't even know. I never went up to Seattle to hear it. But at the first take was to just get the compression going. Now, last year in Berlin, when we rolled out our song, you had to have headphones, and so if you did not have one of the newer iPhones, you could plug and Archain bought like hundreds of headphones that they were giving out, cheap headphones, but that was one of the souvenirs from the conference.
That had this special DRM thing built in?
No, they didn't have that, but they were wired headphones nonetheless, so you could get a taste of what it sounded like. And in the mobile app, there was like an A/B switch, turn on immersion, turn off the immersion. And we had 3 songs to listen to demo because the songs have to be engineered with this.
Who made the decision to do this way?
This is all Greg's idea.
And you listened to him?
Nobody, most people didn't agree with him, but he did it anyway. Anyway, I have to say, I'm somewhat of an audiophile myself, and when I did the A/B test, I never really heard much of a difference. I don't know if anybody else felt the same way.
I thought I could tell it was different, but I'm not an audiophile, and I just said 8 million.
Well, can I ask another stupid question?
Yeah, I want to give Daryl a chance because sometimes he has a good counter opinion. Not to put you on the spot, Daryl.
No, thanks, Ned. But I'd like to hear your other probably not that stupid question, Eric.
What's the point of this?
What's the point of what was the point of immersion?
No.
Okay.
What is the point of our song? What are you doing here? What are you doing with Archain? Like this, are you developing a service? Are you trying to build a business, or are you developing an open source distributed platform protocol, right? That people are going to be able to use in different ways. And those decisions, all those decisions that you just listed are the decisions that private businesses would make to monopolize a certain market vertical, right? Those aren't how you build a distributed platform, protocol. Like, you're ignoring all of the things that the whole point of building a block on a blockchain is that it's supposed to be using decentralized open protocols. Yeah.
So yeah, I'll take a swipe at that. So here's what happened. So we had about 25 portfolio. We call them portfolio companies that are two venture firms, Reflective and Pythia, had signed up to build their dApps on the RChain platform, and there are about 25 of them. And the feeling at the time was that either they weren't moving fast enough to really stress test the platform, or their ultimate number of transactions wasn't going to be enough to support our proof of stake platform. So Greg's thought was, if you build a music streaming service, you will get that scaling, because you will get a ton of transactions as you keep signing up people and you're streaming songs, and that would actually give us, and since we would build that internally, we would be able to stress test the system and then also provide the number of transactions per second to get our chain off the ground and running.
Thinking like a true engineer, yes.
Yeah, so that was, number of transactions and stress test the system, and that was, from my understanding, the rationale to go ahead with our song.
And Daryl, did you have anything that you wanted to say to that?
Yeah, a couple things. I think that in hindsight, the immersion deal didn't make sense. But at the time, there was a really strong rationale for it that I agreed with, and I thought that it was a move forward. It certainly does seem a little odd that we would buy a proprietary codec when we're more of an open source kind of vibey community. And there were a lot that did object to that aspect of it, and it was still, that part of it was still kind of controversial to me as well. But there was some you could almost call it, this is probably too loaded of a way of saying it, but almost a benevolent dictatorship aspect to the proprietariness of it, that had this possibility that we could have done things the right way. And I mean, I know you guys are probably all familiar with Ted Nelson and the Xanadu project.
I'm not familiar, actually.
Oh, okay. So in late 1960s, 1969, this brilliant man who currently lives on a boat named Ted Nelson came up with basically the beginnings of what ended up being the World Wide Web. He invented the term hypertext. And in fact, Tim Berners-Lee kind of... I
thought it was Vannevar Bush that did hypertext.
Who?
Vannevar Bush, as we may think. The MEMEX system. 1940s.
When would that have been?
1940s.
Okay, well, maybe you're right. As I understood it, it came from Ted Nelson's brain, at least the concept, because he had this whole kind of idea that he called Xanadu, where you would basically have provenance throughout. And he was more into text. So he was basically, the idea was that, someone would write something and add something like a Google Doc kind of concept, or a collaborative text document. And everyone would get credit and eventually ideally be paid for it. Anyway, the point being, one could call Ted Nelson's vision a form of benevolent dictatorship. So it's kind of, anyway, I'm going too long-winded here, but there was a rationale to the vision and the idea of a trio of projects that were all coming together, and that would be Immersion, RChain, and Resonate. And you can't really talk about the Immersion plan and the RChain plan without including Resonate in that whole kind of vision. But really, we're talking about the past now. We're talking about something that's kind of come and gone, and in many ways, I'd like to return back to the idea of kind of keeping the codec and everything open, myself personally.
Yeah, I mean, I think with in respect to the decentralized art project, I think that in and of itself is the first and foremost priority, is to develop like an open source distributed protocol layer, right, for this thing to exist that doesn't use any proprietary technologies, that isn't reliant on any private companies to exist. It needs to exist as a substrate, and then if people want to build companies off of it to facilitate certain aspects of its marketing or distribution, that's different. But the fundamental layer of this thing needs to exist for all culture creators, right, to sort of take advantage of and protect themselves, and re-envision how culture happens. And this applies both to art, to music, I mean, really anything, journalism, how we think about ideas as things, needs to shift, right? But not just in like, how do I monetize this and make a quick buck type of way, or like just drive traffic. It has to have a much broader social vision, in my opinion.
And that's kind of what we have with RCAT, right? With RCAT, you can. So the only thing missing, I think, is the digital rights management piece, but everything else is there to build on top of that platform.
Well, so can you explain what actually is there? Like, what is the is there? What's the is, man?
So I sent you that link to the GitHub, and I apologize. I could probably go a little late to my next meeting, but I do have a meeting at 10:30. But that's okay. Let me see.
Where did you send it?
I sent it to your email address a couple weeks ago. But let me see if I could bring it up really quick, because I think
you sent it to me. Oh.
To Eric, yeah.
Arson GitHub. Oh, Arson GitHub. I'm sorry, I didn't see that.
Yeah.
There we are.
But let me see, and we do have to update the diagram a little bit. But
what do I like? What should I look at here, though? I see a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know how technical you were, so that's why I said in that email, I'm happy to go.
I can play one on TV, but
Yeah, I think what you see on GitHub are the tools that a developer would need to create an R-chain dApp, right, Ned?
Yes. So so if you all can see my screen and you see this diagram here.
Yeah.
Can you all see that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Cool. So what we've done is created this infrastructure, if you will, to build RCAT, and this is basically what we did to build our song. And this is all scripted out, so if you have a DevOps person, they could get this up and running in about 2 days. And we've just proven that again with another consulting company who's working on some stuff for us, and they had to get this up and running. And it's going to take them about 2 days. So it's really easy to get up and running. And so basically, where should we start? So here's our node right over here. So that's like your R node server. This is like the blockchain. And what happens is there's some kind of digital asset. Here you can see this was Immersive Studios. We have to take that out now. But there's some kind of storage of a digital asset, a WAV file, digital art, whatever it is. And then there's this RSong acquisition piece, which we wrote. And that just keeps looking on a file store for the digital assets to be dropped. So in the case of the music, it was a compressed WAV file, a piece of art, which would act as the art for the song, and then some metadata, which had some prescribed pieces of data that needed to be included. And when those three pieces were found on this cloud storage area, the acquisition piece would then take that, ingest it, and store that onto the blockchain. Right, so we had binary data, we had the metadata. The binary data would be the audio file and the picture. And the metadata would be the data points that we needed to collect for each of the audio files. And that's what gets stored.
What was the third thing?
So it's the audio file itself, the digital art, the artwork that goes with the audio file, and then the metadata, which would be some data points that describe the asset. And
Okay, so three things. So the digital, so the audio file, a picture, those are two things, not just like binary data as one. So
two things.
Okay.
And there was actually, in this instance, there were four things because the audio file had two versions, right? It had the immersive the immersive full sound capability file, and then a simply compressed audio file, right? So you could have, so when you didn't have the hardware to hear the full immersive experience, you could play basically the compressed stereo file.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So technically there were four. And that gets stored on the Arnode blockchain.
Can you talk about what the metadata is? What is that?
It's like artist, genre, name of the song, the public facing name of the song, things like that. We have a whole.
Is there any data stored in the metadata that is acted upon so that like mediates that relationship, or is it just descriptive data?
It's only descriptive at this point. We could do that, but for this, it was pure descriptive text.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Now you can see to the left of this, we have our Roland contracts.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so these are smart contracts that when a song was played, these could now start giving out royalties and other things.
Okay, so the current smart contract is after that, at the metadata. The metadata is stored as what, like a JSON file, or what is it?
Yeah, it comes over as a JSON file, and all the ingestion pieces were written in Scala. So, yeah, but it gets stored on the blockchain, and Arnode stores everything in the tuple space.
Okay, and is it possible for the metadata, once the metadata is stored, is it able to be dynamically updated, or is it like forever in the forever zone?
So one of the things, and I have to say, I don't understand how this works, but Kayvon has said our tuple space is actually mutable. So you could change the metadata at some point.
Really?
Yeah.
Because like in Ethereum, like with using the Zeppelin system, they're calling it like side chaining, where like you can kind of create open variables and smart contracts that can be updated over time. I don't really understand how it works, but like the idea that if something changes, in relationship to the file, you don't have to create an entirely new JSON file. You can just update the pre-existing one.
Well, let's not call it, so in our chain, it's not a JSON file. It may come in as a JSON file, and then it gets written to the blockchain, and it's stored in a block, and we use a tuple space to store that. But once it's on the blockchain, right, blockchains are supposed to be immutable.
Mm-hmm.
But Kayvon has said there's a mechanism, and I don't know how this works, but he has said there is a mechanism to update the tuple space. Because otherwise what you'd have to do is you'd have to have that metadata on the blockchain, and then you'd have to have another record that updates that record. And so now your blockchain is the original, and then whatever changes are made has to sit in another record, right? And then that becomes its own little chain of changes to the original data.
Well, I mean, and in a sense, with provenance, like understanding the history of an object, a digital object, that's actually very important, right? That we every time like the ownership of a digital object changes hands, a new file is written to the blockchain that references the old file but is given a new hash. And then
that's, yeah, but I don't know if we're doing that. I'm not sure. Kayvon never really had time to drill into that with me, but it's a good question of how that works.
Okay, and then and then in the contract, is the contract what is that referencing specifically? Like, is the file once you Lauren VHS, you there? Yo, Lauren. Check 1 2. This thing on? Can't hear you.
Yeah, she doesn't have a mic in the participants. She doesn't show a microphone. So it may be a setting that she needs to adjust.
Oh, yeah, if you go into preferences, Lauren, you can tell it the computer, the software, which.
Hi.
Hello.
Hey, guys. Oh, brilliant! Everyone, meet Lauren Van Hoftenschik. Lauren is a friend and a collaborator. Lauren is doing her dissertation. She's an expert on art and law.
Ooh.
And has a lot of really valuable insights into how this works. And she's also been involved in the blockchain space for a number of years.
Great.
As long as I've been doing it, we've been sort of talking about it. And I'm really happy that you could come up. So we are actually right in the middle of getting an explanation over how the content rights management system for this music streaming service that they built sometime in the last year or two works. It's getting a little technical, but I'm trying to understand how this works in relationship to that we've talked about with Benton.
So is this too much? Is this too much tech for everybody? If it is, I'm fine to defer to other conversations.
No. I think it's important because, one of the things that we, when we talk about art, like how an art object can exist on a decentralized server or a decentralized blockchain storage device, we have to think about this area, like the metadata, like what is that? How does that update? How does that relate to both the binary data, which would be the file or the set of files, as well as the contract mediating those things? Like they act circularly, right? And so this idea about whether or not these things are updatable or whether or not they get rewritten to the next blockchain once they're updated, once the transfer or sale of the digital object happen, these are really important things to sort of start ironing out. And just on a technical level, like, is it possible, or how does that adapt to those specific needs?
Yeah, I'm not sure at the end of the day if that really matters, because that's all the back end, right? And if you have, as long as you're storing it, whatever the mechanism is for storing it, as long as it's managed correctly, and then your smart contracts are managing usage and how it's consumed and who gets paid for it, I think those are also maybe bigger issues, unless you really do want to drive down that level in the tech. And then I would say we need to get a meeting with Kayvon.
I would love to do that actually at some point, not right now. I mean, I thought we would just be able to get a broad overview right now, and I could introduce you guys to Lauren, and she could talk a little bit about her interests.
Okay. So why don't I just take a few more minutes, and then I got to run to this other meeting, and let me just finish out discussing the diagram here.
Okay, cool.
All right. So let's say from this point, all the data, the audio file, the metadata, the picture file are now stored on the blockchain. Now you have this little smartphone here, and that connects through a series of proxy servers, which they then go in to request the song. Now, rather than hitting the blockchain every time, so this is scaling and throughput, rather than going back to the native digital file that's on the blockchain, we built a caching system in front of it, right? And so this is a Redis cache, which is, you spin up on Google, whatever your cloud service is. And so it just, and this is how YouTube does it. This is how every streaming service does it. They try to intelligently cache the most recent plays so they don't constantly have to go to their data store. So you can think of the blockchain really as just an elaborate data store. So we built this caching in front of the audio content. This looks for if the content is in the cache. If it is, it serves it up from the caching system. If not, it makes a request to the blockchain itself, and then pulls out the data from the blockchain.
And that's how it's served in real time, basically, because it's cached to this Google Cloud service, which is then capable of streaming it to us.
Right, exactly. So, if you're looking for some obscure song, it's probably not going to be in the cache, and it has to then make the full round trip to the blockchain.
So, Lauren, one of the really interesting things about this R-chain cooperative is it uses this specialized type of calculus called row calculus that apparently enables them to store content directly to the blockchain itself. So it's like, think about like a blockchain entirely made of, like we could have a blockchain entirely made of content, which is like what Benton's been talking about a little bit.
Yeah.
But
And so a couple other, I think, important pieces here. So this R node right now would be, you're going to have to connect to the parent node, right? So, but at some point you could spin this up and you could run your own R node as a shard off the parent shard. And then you could do all kinds of things in your own little world, like you could have your own token economics and your own scaling and throughput and metrics on that. And so you could create your own little world in your own shard based on this architecture as well. But for the first release, this R node is going to be commingled with all the other applications and data that's running on the R-Chain platform.
Because you need the transaction, that you need those transactions to scale the network, so everything gets lumped in together for now.
That's part of it. The other reason was just practical. Right now, the validators are going to be mostly run by the co-op itself with maybe a few others. And then that's a whole nother effort we have to do, which is to have more validators come online to help us totally decentralize. But also the code to do the sharding is not going to be fully ready with the first release. So anybody running on the R node platform will be running in, I call it the parent node, right? But there is no other yet.
Okay.
But that's definitely built into the framework of R node.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
All right, brilliant. Thank you so much, Ned, for giving us this sort of top-down overview. I know we're scheduled for Thursday to have a little, is it half an hour?
Yeah.
Okay.
We could start there, and then if we need more time, we could schedule more.
Brilliant. That sounds wonderful. And I'd love to meet this person, Kayvon, at some point.
Yeah, he's knees deep in, so he's moved away from RSong, and he's working on the core development platform in the push to get mainnet out. And that's really consuming his time, but let's see if we could get maybe a half hour of his time. And
yeah, I don't want to waste his time if he's really busy. And I should try to dig into as much of this as possible so that there's some maybe better questions for him when we do meet.
Yeah, so maybe after Thursday we could come up with a game plan on how we can best use his time.
Brilliant.
Okay, cool.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ned.
All right, thanks everybody.
See you, Ned.
Okay, bye.
So Lauren, meet Jim, Steve, and Gary. I don't know where Gary is right now. Jim is who I met in New York, who was at ITP when I was doing the unconference there. And Jim has a deep history with decentralized technology and like sort of early internet pioneer stuff. And basically, we've just started having these meetings for the last couple of weeks, starting to sort of like talk about what some of the different possibilities are and sort of establishing a baseline for what we're working on. I've also been attending some of the other Zoom meetings that the cooperative has. There's a larger group dealing with music, which is having an interesting sort of parallel conversation, but very different. And so I'm trying to, I guess, get a sense of where everyone else is at here and start to sort of have a conversation about how we can collaborate and develop tools that real creative communities can use. Rather than speculative creative communities or imaginary communities or our distorted projected ideas of what creative communities are. And I thought maybe your voice would be really welcome as we start to develop some of those ideas about what types of things real artists need and how we could create tools that will really benefit them rather than our idea about what artists need based on our engineering objectives or ideological objectives or any other objectives.
Yeah. Sure. Okay. Well, nice to meet everyone. Sorry I was late joining. I'm teaching at a summer summer program now, and the schedule has just been a little less predictable than I would like it to be. Anyway, but hello. Yeah, just in a nutshell, maybe, my research, I'm doing an art history PhD right now, but my research concerns sort of the history of artists using contracts with their work, really kind of looking at the trajectory of one pretty iconic one from 1971. But what's really caught my attention in the last few years, and where I've been, I guess, kind of like pulled into, and very happily the last few years, is into this sort of conversation about how could we, well, like basically just like how are these tools, blockchain smart contracts that are now available to us, going to enable us to rethink the way that transactions, payment systems, even structures of sort of ownership in art look like, or can look like. I mean, historically, there's kind of a lot of really interesting, I think, sort of recircling happening of like some things that were attempted maybe back with like, sort of the most extreme legal experimentation in like conceptual art even. But pair that with the really huge interest in the last decade, or maybe a revived interest in the last decade in, equity issues for artists. And again, sort of needs to basically find a more kind of equitable way in which whatever this thing called the art market is could be sort of structured differently. So I've been amazed by this sort of like rush to, or maybe like the way in which the like art transactions are being seen as kind of like test cases for applications of blockchain and smart contracts. But to really take that seriously, there are a number of sort of interesting artist groups who are really experimenting with the, in building platforms and in kind of, again, thinking about just what the sort of implications of these technologies could be. And actually, even just earlier this week, last week, I had a conversation with two people in New York who actually are in the process of building a smart contract version of this iconic one from 1971 that I researched. It's called the Artist Reserve Rights Transfer and Sale Agreement. But just as this sort of it gets cited a lot in these kinds of conversations. But it's interesting to see now that this citation of this document over and over again is now actually being experimented with as like a real, smart contract tool. But one of the things that has been catching the interest of artists is the capacity for smart contracts to be used to pay resale royalties more easily, and even like exhibition fees, and basically to kind of make all of these transactions, which are notoriously impossible to actually secure in the existing art world, like to actually make them a reality now. So like all of these platforms that have launched in the past 2 years to sell digital art, again, like on blockchain-based platforms using smart contracts, it's like the norm now that they all include resale royalties with them. But what Eric and I were talking about a couple of weeks ago, and I guess what I've been thinking about more is just how much that sort of seems like such a limited framework for thinking about what these platforms could do, or what, just what these sets of tools could do. And so I guess I'm interested in thinking about like how we could move beyond sort of models of just like individual transactions or individual remuneration through something like royalties and fees, and how we could possibly get into bigger sort of models of redistribution. And I don't quite know what that looks like yet, but there's a lot of space for experimentation right now.
But
that seems very exciting.
Lauren, when we were at the blockchain conference in New York, I mean, one of the things that I started realizing is that the whole decentralized art community is kind of, seems like they're actually turning their backs on resale royalties because of the new platforms like Rare Art, Jessica Angel, even.
Rare, yeah.
She's like, they were all like, basically they cited this like, this free market idea of that any regulation that you put on something automatically creates a secondary black market. So people are going to inevitably go around any type of regulatory procedure that you put in place to sell your thing on the black. But what's really interesting, and I thought about this for a while, is they're misunderstanding art as its own type of asset class, because the artist, if my digital art piece is sold on the black market, I can denounce it. I can publicly, disown it, right? And then it stops being my piece. And like, you can't do that with other forms of property, And so the nature of what is this thing is inherently defined contractually. And we as artists have power over that definition, up until it's the point of sale. So it creates a really interesting relationship between what is the framework for the thing that I'm selling, and how does that relate to the transaction, because I still have power over it through the transaction, rather than just like, I manufactured 10 widgets and now I'm selling them, and once you have it, you have the widget, whatever,
And in that scenario where an artist disowns a piece of artwork that they've created, then the value of that artwork is diminished. Is that kind of the end result? Is that the impact of what they're trying to do?
Yeah, it basically depends on the artist's name, like their signature is what gives it value.
Gives it the value. It's not so much the art, it's the art and who created the art. It's they're there in tandem. Okay.
Yeah.
So with the smart contract, if there's this connection, this union between the art and who created the art and what their current state of mind, or how they, I guess, the status of, if they claim their acceptance of the art, that adds the value. I'm getting into a whole new world of language with the art experience. So bear with me here, but I'm following along. So.
Yeah, and it seems to me that the whole sequence of provenance would now be subject to this, affirmation or renunciation process that gives the art its value.
Yeah.
And that's the buying and selling, that provenance, it goes, you have these, that value is transferred along all those transactions. But what you were saying was the current models that are out there, they're saying that only happens the first time. And then with the resale, that's not there. And that's what you're trying to build, would like to see built into a improved upon model.
Yes, and the resale creates the ability to transfer resale rights with an object, sort of builds in a marketing platform with the art. Because if I can possess the art and then share it in an acceptable fashion with the original creator, then more power to everybody. It's a win-win.
Yeah, but that's where sort of like cultural hurdles come in, though. I mean, we're just limiting this to a U.S. context right now, maybe, but there's the perennial problem with not having a resale royalties law here is just really the extent to which ownership rights are so entrenched sort of culturally, and so the sort of very idea of the resale royalty, of artists getting a share, basically a percentage of the resale value down the line, has really never gained traction in the U.S. legally. But I should say, it is law in over 70 countries worldwide, like all throughout the EU and most Latin American countries. It's not always enforced, and there are a lot of limitations on it, the way that these laws are written. Like in many jurisdictions, they only apply to works sold at auction, for example. But it's a very fraught kind of system. But so there is this kind of, I really do think this sort of like cultural barrier around, you know, notions of ownership rights, personal property rights, all of this stuff. Once I buy an artwork, it's mine. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that there isn't, you know, desire on the part of artists to have these things in place. There's also, you know, desire, or at least, you know, acceptance on the part of a lot of collectors to have these kinds of terms in place. I mean, the thing that I study is artists' ability to use contracts to be able to create, you know, these kind of just, you know, extra rights in their work, basically. And so artists have been looking to smart contracts, I think, as a way of basically sort of making all of this, you know, ostensibly seamless, you know, built in to the work itself, built into transactions from day one, all of this kind of thing. So that you don't end up with this problem over time of like, not just non-enforceability, but basically like artists, you know, losing say over what happens to their work over time. And it's interesting, you know, the auction houses, like, you know, Christie's is already partnering with this company called Artery to register all of the works that go through some auctions that they've held. It's not everything so far.
Wait,
but like to register. Sorry.
Wait, not the other one, the Codex. They were, isn't it? I thought they were partnering.
No. I'm talking about Christie's partnering with this company Artery to log everything. Artery uses Ethereum to log everything on the Ethereum blockchain via Artery. But you know, the way that agreement is structured is that Christie's basically, you know, maintains I forget what their term is, but you know, they're like the sort of like trusted gatekeeper for, you know, everybody's information. And the purpose of that partnership is purely to create these provenance records, which are about maintaining and, you know, creating, but more so maintaining the values, in these cases, high values of works over time. They're not being designed to meet any kind of you know, needs of artists, be it for resale royalties, but also close out artists from even having access to knowing who the owners of their work are, which is a big problem that happens today with the way that auctions work. And even some galleries too, they won't disclose to artists who have actually purchased their works.
Oh, wow.
So even if artists did want to kind of like come forward with claiming, you know, the right to have a say over like what types of exhibitions their work is included in, for example, they would have no ability to do that because they don't even know where it is. And this is another, again, just kind of perennial problem of the field, which there have been attempts to address with, you know, kind of traditional contracts, but you know, this again could be kind of a new tool for opening up maybe better ways to achieve all of this. And I should say also that for the most part too, the platforms that are being developed by I would say artist-oriented companies or companies that are more designed to serve artists are pretty much only focusing on digital art. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's an unnecessary limitation. I'm sort of not sure right now. But what I will say is two things about that. I think it probably makes sense at this to focus on digital artworks, which could mean anything from like video to, you know, an animation to, you know, all kinds of things. But it doesn't have to be limited to that. At the same time, there are other companies who are working on, like, you know, QR code stickers or that kind of thing that could, like, go onto a physical page, you know, whatever. It's fine. It's all a matter of testing. But I mean, to me, I think it sort of makes sense. This is actually something that a developer said to me recently, is that it probably makes sense to think about how blockchain and smart contracts could be best used for digital objects, at least at this stage. And then, you know, for physical objects, there is kind of a whole universe of, you know, paperwork systems that are already developed, and, you know, maybe that's fine for those kinds of things.
Lauren, can I ask you something? In relationship to how we create the definition of a distributed object, particularly as it pertains to art and art object, because of the peculiarities and specificity of the needs of the art object, as well as the pre-existent legal framework that has existed to validate, right? Like, we have several things, like for physical art or conceptual art or video art, that have existed, right? In terms of, like, the certificate of authenticity, which provides provenance, and then the contract attached to that, which defines the terms of what the work actually is, so it can be sold, yeah? And thus, when we talk about creating digital art, like tokenization systems, part of the issue is that they're trying to supplant the idea of a certificate of authenticity, which is the thing that is de facto recognized in the art world as providing the provenance, with some kind of token system, which is, like, attached to a wallet. And that's, like, a misunderstanding, because the art world needs a certificate of authenticity, right?
Yeah. I think regardless, I think you would always need, I mean, well, it's two things. I think the hope on one level is that the token becomes the certificate of authenticity, but I'm not sure if this was your question, actually, but I think just in terms of standard practices and norms, some kind of additional documentation is always going to be needed. Now, did I just break up? But
you're good. You're good.
I mean, but another sort of, you know, ongoing issue is this question of data not being able to be stored in the blockchain at all. But so, like, if something that is a more, like, lengthy certificate could be stored, or even, you know, a JPEG, you know, I think that would begin to solve some of the problems so far in terms of slowness of uptake, but also in terms of how applicable blockchain and smart contracts could be to the way the existing art market works. Does that make sense? Does that answer some of the question?
Yeah. So in other words, like, I guess what I'm understanding, and tell me if I'm right, we do have to replicate certain aspects of the pre-existing legal structures that validate what an art is, versus trying to supplant them.
Well, if you're asking, I guess my answer there was more about norms than legal practices. Although, okay, so as everyone here knows, it is a massive conversation, you know, just what the interaction between smart contracts and, you know, what are more broadly understood as legal contracts are going to be over time as all of this develops. And that's still a whole world of extreme unknowns right now. And it's just going to be a matter of use and precedent being set and all of that kind of stuff. But I mean, if you want the legal answer, there are certain laws around certificates of authenticity specifically, actually, which kind of vary state by state, but like basically are about are against forging certificates and are designed to ensure that, you know, certificates when traded with an artwork are genuine. And
So therefore, as we sort of start to integrate this with the blockchain, we need to make sure that the structure of that is being replicated, right? So it's usable as a court document versus just saying, well, I've got this token thing with none of the other information, it's just like,
yeah. And so if that information could carry with it, that's not only, sort of takes care of a practical problem of things if information just kind of being separated over time. But I think that also, I hadn't thought about this before, but that also kind of adds a nice and interesting level of like just information sharing too. Like I could see that being a way in which the problem of artists not knowing who their work is purchased by kind of becomes fixed basically automatically by this. It's,
it's not fixed automatically until we have a system of identification that's attached to the wallet, right? Which with Jim and some of the members of Big Life Collective, which is another member of this community, they're working on this kind of sovereign identity problem, which then you would know who the identity of the person whose wallet, is collecting the work is attached to. Is right now it's going to be totally anonymous. You don't know who it's going to, unless it's being done through a gallery and it's off chain. The gallerist knows who you're selling to. You're using the blockchain to authenticate that. But like right now, it's just the wallet is going to be updated in the provenance and their certificate of authenticity. Like, okay, this token is now connected to this wallet, not this person. I mean, it could be. Maybe we could build a field in that requires that, but you still don't actually know that person is attached to that wallet. There's no way of proving it.
Yeah. But that's another sort of question too.
Do you need that?
Yeah. Do we need that?
Well, is that the question? Is the question, do we need that, or what's the question?
No. It's not the question, do we need that? Well, I guess it's a matter of identifying what the problems are that want solving. And so if this knowing who the owner is a problem in want of solving, then I would say that we would need that.
Well, I mean, because I can envision a situation whereby through the smart contract, it doesn't matter who actually owns it, because the artist still has exhibition rights and access through encryption to the distributed object.
Well, then you're talking about a license essentially, and no longer ownership, which is a different paradigm, and which is I think a very interesting one. And I've heard, just in talking with various more like legal experts on these issues, it is interesting that most or many contracts developed by artists to sort of control the ongoing life of their work, in essence, really are licenses and not contracts, because of this precise point that you're identifying, right? That like artists always need to approve of exhibitions or need to approve of installations, or are kind of always folded in. They always maintain final say and even maintain a kind of like financial share of the thing into the future, then it's a license at that point.
Yeah.
Which is but that's also where kind of cultural hurdles re-enter, and where this kind of problem of like cultural expectations around property and ownership get very complicated. Although one interesting thing is that I think like so far, at least what I've noticed is that that people purchasing works through existing blockchain-based art sales platforms aren't really like coming from the like capital A like traditional art realm proper. They actually are coming more from either like the tech world or like music industry or something like this. So notions around licensing and notions around I guess notions around licensing and even ownership has more to do with the way that like music tends to operate, and notions around resale and value are almost tied more to like gaming in a way, like like crypto kitties, it's like he's a prime example of this sort of thing. So the whole like logic around the way that like value shifts and builds over time is pretty different.
For the community, but like I think like I'm interested in sort of eschewing the way the crypto art community is currently handling this, right? And sort of creating maybe a different definition from scratch that is really going to just starting with the artist and not starting with technology or with a skewed idea about art or culture or collectibles, I think that's like the value of what's possible here right now, is that we can start from scratch in a sense, rather than sort of operating. I want nothing to do with the crypto art community, basically.
Yeah. No, I agree. I almost mean that more in like putting my like an ethnographic hat on or something,
No, I totally agree.
The way in which like different norms from different fields have kind of
coalesced,
molded this very different looking idea of an art economy, and I think there are lessons to be gleaned from that too, for sure.
Yeah, no, it is really interesting. It's just like one of the things I'm really conscientious of is the standpoint from which we start a conversation. Like I'm noticing, and like as developers or as engineers or as conceptualists, the biases that we were bringing into these conversations from the get-go that then sculpts the scaffolding, right? So as we start building, like, like we're having this conversation about music in the other group, and I'm realizing that I keep like kind of problematizing it, as we like have this conversation, because I'm like, well, what about these people? What about those people, right? Like, and the people that are developing it really just actually from one group of people, right, that they understand. But I'm like, wait, there's many art worlds, there's many music worlds, and are we developing something that's lateral enough to accommodate all of these people, or are we just building the next title,
Yeah, I might throw that back though and say that like I don't think I want like a one platform to rule them all like kind of scenario. You know what I mean? I don't think there is any kind of one size fits all thing.
No, but we have protocols.
I don't think that is something that we would want. What I do think we would want though is to like find a way to use these tools to do something that aims to solve existing known problems for real living artists instead of making it about this sort of like I don't want to make a joke about like this like the extreme kind of like hyper financialization, hyper sort of like financialization plus libertarian kind of model. Just like extreme like individualist politics that seem to dominate that sphere. I think it's just like there's like a lot more to do with these tools that actually meet existing needs.
Well, but my whole point about that is like it's not about developing a platform at all, but about developing a system of protocols, right? That are free, they're open. They're like, it's not about developing a platform. Like people can develop platforms on top of that, but you need to lay the infrastructure down. Like we needed to have HTML, and someone needed to come together and say, hey, let's invent HTML and make it standardized so then people can develop all their different web apps and companies and whatever off of that. But it was standardized and it was open. And in a sense, that's what I'm sort of trying to sort of figure out or tease out right now is what does that look like if we were to develop a standardization model that is not owned by anyone, is part of a distributed open source commons, right? Because like the fact that this company is partnering with Sotheby's, they have a stake in that and they're going to be making revenue off of that in perpetuity. So if I want to sell my artwork as a digital artist, now I have to move through their system when I may not agree with it ideologically or conceptually, versus being able to start 1 or 2 steps below them, already have my work editioned, have it uploaded, and then be able to negotiate the terms of my contract myself with the distribution platform like them, but like it'd be like almost like standardized first, so it's open and accessible to all people, Otherwise, we're always going to be part of someone else's conversation or someone else's idea about what art is and how it functions ecologically. Yeah. Would you agree with that, or not? Maybe not so much.
Well, I think as
Yeah, that
far
sounds
as
good.
practicality, just as a baseline, it's like where do you start with this, an enormous concept, and just having that baseline that you can start to build upon in various niches. I think that's a good starting point. So, and I can follow. I can follow the conversation where you're going with it, and I think it connects with the artist world and the frame of mind. Open source, it's very high level, and then from a technical aspect, being able to customize it as necessary along the different niches. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe I feel like we should maybe end this conversation here, because we kind of went through a lot of stuff, and I'm sure everyone's brains are kind of swimming. But Lauren, would you be able to join us again next week? Are you available around this time generally?
Yes, a Monday next week. I think that I can. Let me just pop at my calendar. Yes. Yes, that's great.
Because basically what's going to happen is I'm going to meet with Ned and some of these other people that are developing these kind of asset management systems on our chain. And then I want to circle back next week and figure out how we can sort of integrate this into the concept of the distributed object and the needs that an art object would have. Right. And I laid it out. I sent you attached to the chat here is a link to the first draft of the distributed object framework that I was working on. There's like just the outline basically of like what are the components and how do they relate to each other to create a legally viable entity. I think I sent you the first draft of the longer document that I was working on, but
yeah, the Google Doc, right?
Yeah, this is just like this is a 2-page outline of that. Why can't I find the chat window? Where's the chat window in? How does this?
Yeah, move the cursor down to the very bottom. You should get a toolbar at the base. Are you on a computer or on an iPad?
I'm on a computer.
So do you see the toolbar which invite participants, share, chat? Those?
No, I've got like this little like.
Well, share your. I was going to say if you share your screen, we'd be able to see where you're at. But that's if you can see the icon for share your screen, then you're practically there.
Oh wait, no, okay, I wasn't in the. Oh, that's right. I wasn't in the window.
Oh, okay.
So, Laura, did you get that link? I can just email it to you. It's just a 2-page thing. But like, what I'd love for us to do is. I'll just email it to you. But like next week, what I really want to try and do is start going through these different components: distributed storage, hashing, certificate of authenticity, the smart contract, and start like sort of talking about what are each of these things and why are they necessary for a distributed art object to exist, and then how does that relate to the current capabilities of this asset management system that they've built for music here. Because I'm already picking up on certain things that could be adapted but aren't going to work currently with the framework that we're going to need for artists. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm going to try and bring some more of those people into this conversation next week.
Okay.
Is that useful for you guys, Jim, Gary, Steve?
Yeah, I think everything. At least as far as ARCAT in any application, it's at such an early stage. This is the point to where it's good to start to give definition to where when feature sets start to be added on, what are those feature sets going to be? What are they going to look like? What are they going to do? Because a developer, he just likes to be told what he needs to build. So if all that groundwork can be laid out and all the thought laid out beforehand to where someone like a Kayvon can we tell him, okay, Kayvon, this is what it's got to look like. This is what it's got to do. Build it. He's like, that's what I need. So, this is a very timely discussion to start to create this feature set of the architecture of what you envision it to look like.
Well, also because like the other thing is like, I mean, my background, my understanding of how blockchains work is basically based on the Ethereum platform. And right now, as it currently stands, it's possible to build this system on the Ethereum platform. But like our chain may have better ways of doing this. Just the fact that the blockchain itself can serve as the storage medium is entirely different.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead. I didn't want to cut you off.
Yeah, and to speak to that, that's kind of the success story or the anticipated success of what our chain has to offer. It's scalable, Visa level transactions, 40,000 transactions per second, and face level content, being able to serve up this huge amount of content. So, this is
we avoid technical debt, which Ethereum piles up on you.
Yeah.
And the magic behind that, this is where all this, Eric mentioned earlier about the Erlang and the row calculus. It's all this mathematics that underlines it, where things are all processed at the same time. It's concurrency, which allows all this magic to happen. So this is why this is not only people feel it's not only a great project, but it could be the project when it comes to this space of blockchain. So, and as you attend more of these sessions, you'll get more acquainted with what the underlying mechanism that's going on that makes all this possible. But it's very real. It's very real as far as the scalability of high transactions and being able to store all this content on blockchain.
Yeah. So so I think navigating and sort of finding out how we're going to relate to these sort of emergent possibilities is really interesting, and figuring out how we can adapt it, because like the idea of like, okay, there's this notion of the ontology of the digital art object as a thing in and of itself, not as just an infinitely replicable file, right? And thus it needs to be hashed and given individuation, and then we need to have those hashes reflected in multiple places, right, to sort of holographically kind of keep the thing sort of floating, right, in midair. And so some of those things may be redundant. We may not need to be doing certain things, but we still may need to have a separate certificate of authenticity, even though there's metadata embedded with the file. You know what I mean? Like we may need a discrete thing called the certificate of authenticity just to legally substantiate the object, right? And then the smart contract can sort of mediate the transactions. But there's also things that we have to think about in terms of archiving, right? And like in providing instructions for execution or re-exhibition, right? So I've got a 20-year-old media file that needs to be exhibited. What are the instructions for how that file can be updated, right? Does it have to stay in this definite, in the pixel aspect ratio that it was created, or can it be up-resed? You know, what is the piece? Because even if you're talking about a video file, you talk to 10 different artists about what the actual work is, and you're gonna get 10 different answers. It's not just about the video file. It's like, it could be the system that they used to create the file, or it could be the tape that the file was on, or it could be like, I mean, it could be any number of things, and those all need to be accounted for in the fabric of the object, how the object is created on the system.
And Eric, you had sent
all together. That's, I mean, ideal, right? That's the goal. Yeah.
The smart contract is the art, or becomes part of the art. And I think back to when you said that early on, Eric, and I've been thinking about that in my mind, kind of mulling it over as far as what that means. But that's the smart contract becomes part of the art. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've like tried developing blockchain sculptures where the smart contract is the art object, right? And maybe is acting on certain other things, but ultimately the object is just this procedural piece of code that's on a distributed network, right? And like, how do we intervene? How do we insert something into that network that does bizarre things that, like, why would you want to do that? But it's art, so it's okay, you know? Like, I don't know. But yeah, okay, awesome. Does anyone else have anything else that they want to throw in there? Jim? Gary?
Yeah, not really. I mean, I'd be interested in some examples of the kind of contracts that we'll be writing. You know, kind of like prototyping the things that we're going towards. Maybe writing some of these contracts in Rolang.
Well, I'm hoping in the next couple of weeks we get to a place where we can actually do a prototype with an actual piece, like a video art piece or something, right? Where we just create a very baseline distributed object with a certificate of authenticity and a smart contract with resale royalties. The object is stored on the blockchain, it's hashed, and then we can talk about, well, what's the how do we distribute it? How is it viewed? You know, is it just an encryption key? Like we need to figure those things out. And I get that the viewership framework isn't there yet, but we may be able to integrate with somebody else's. I mean, we don't really know. There's other people working on aspects of that problem, you know? But the fundamental substrate needs to be established first. And I think it's not going to be above and beyond to do it because it's already possible with most of these systems, you know?
Yeah, and that's a perfect way to explain it. You know, we get that underlying substrate. That's kind of as far as what this, blockchain art and where we're at, getting that foundation. And I have a sense of the direction or what it is that you're trying to create. You're not trying to create everything for everyone. It's just that generic underpinning that's open source and available to all. So yeah.
Like Jim describes it. What did you say, Jim, to me? You're like, we're building the roads. We're not building the businesses on the side of the road. We're building the goddamn roads. All right, yeah. That's
exactly. Yeah, we're building the roads.
Yeah, it's good. Cool. I would be happy to share some links to like existing models or just sort of other either existing contracts or existing smart contract projects that I know of.
Lauren, so we're on this
useful for reference.
The co-op is on this Discord channel. So maybe I can help you get signed on this Discord thing. It's where like the block art channel is, but there's like 1 million channels and they're all working on different stuff. But it's in this collab group, which apparently, dude, are you going to be at the Platform Co-op conference in November, Trevor Schultz's thing?
When is it?
November, like 11th or 8th or something like that, mid-November.
No, and actually, it's at the same time as another conference I have that I'm giving a talk at, which out of town. So I'm not, unfortunately. But yeah.
But Trevor's involved.
Conference in Hawaii.
Trevor, you're doing a conference in Hawaii?
Conference in Hawaii.
You're kind of breaking up. I thought you said it was Hawaii.
It's pretty awesome. No, like Honolulu.
Oh, it is in Honolulu.
Yeah.
Oh, that's sick. Oh man, I should get on. Why am I not on the circuit? I need to get on the circuit, man. I get to go to places.
Sweet.
I'm going to Amsterdam the week later for the Money Lab conference, which that should be fun. Trevor Schultz is involved with this cooperative. Like this is kind of part of his platform co-op network, or he's a part of this platform co-op network. So there's kind of like a couple of interesting overlaps with like some of the communities that we're involved with, But we can talk about this later. It's like the collab thing, collab cooperative, I suppose.
Yeah, it's cool.
Cool.
But yeah, it's good to know. Okay. Well, good to connect with everyone.
Yeah, thank you for joining us today, Lauren. It was very educational. We appreciate your insight to all of this.
No, thank you. I'm really happy to connect. And again, I'm sorry again that I joined late today. But yeah, but I look forward to keeping this conversation going. It's great to, yeah, again, it's really great to connect with you all.
Oh, tremendous. Very good. Thank you.
All right. Have a
All
good day,
right.
everybody.
Yep.
Have a
Have a
good
good
day,
day,
everyone.
everyone. Good seeing you all. Have a great day. Bye now.